Lev is over 400 years old. Thea, 409, to be precise. Welcome to the Alpha's Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Chapter 27. Inner Time. Alpha Blaton shouted from behind the door. Both the Alpha and other pack member were wearing face masks as they wheeled trolleys in. One of the carts was entirely for Lev, full of raw cuts of different types of raw meats as he wouldn't be able to hunt. The other cart consisted of plenty of different meals for Leah and the two doctors. Alpha Blaton unloaded Lev's hefty meal first before handing Leah her plate and some silverware. "Thank you," she murmured softly. Lev waited until she began to eat to wolf his food down. "I'll bring in some blankets and pillows in a minute. Enjoy your meal." He bowed softly and left the room with the trolleys. Leah ate her pasta quickly, but no one finished their meal faster than Lev. In the span of a few minutes his stomach had grown so much and he was so hungry. "You're so huge now, Lev. This means you're going to have to spend most of your time in your human form," she whispered sympathetically. He whined and curled closer around her body lying on the floor. "I will admit though, you make a nice pillow," she giggled. He chuffed in response and thumped his tail. "Thank you," he murmured through her head. She couldn't believe he could talk like that. Is that what it would sound like in his human form? She'd already heard him speak a few words, but it was nice to hear him hold up a conversation. "I'm glad we can communicate now," she murmured. She pet his head. "Does it work the other way around?" Leah pushed her thoughts towards Lev. "It seems so." Leah didn't bother trying to fight her grin. "That's all Lev wanted for so long," she whispered to him happily. "How have you been feeling lately?" "Pretty good, but eager to get to move around in my human form." "I hope it hasn't been too much," Leah said aloud. "Not at all. It does feel better when you touch me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Good to know," she smiled. "I will take the first watch. Drive Wullahan offered to drive. And Wylan." The night passed uneventfully. Leah woke up every time the doctors switched shifts and Lev was quick to nurture her back to sleep. His body was extremely warm, almost feverish at his normal body temperature, so he fought the urge to lay completely on top of her. The next day passed much like the day before. Lev woke Leah up for breakfast and ate every meal extremely quickly. The doctors were clearly exhausted, but worked hard at maintaining the clearly irritable mass pull from Lev's body. Leah read the plethora of books brought to her by the Alpha and was able to not even notice her surroundings. Lev stared up at her in awe with every giggle and whimper that showed how much Leah was enjoying her book. "Thank you," she murmured a few hours later. Alpha Luke handed her dinner for the evening, then proceeded to unload large, skinned animals from a cart. Leah grimaced and tried not to look. She could only imagine how large his stomach had grown and how hungry he was during the day, but watching him devour the animal was not the most delicious thing to watch. "No, let me in or ice where you will never see the light of day again." Leah's head snapped up at the sound of Aunt Johanna's voice. Lev chose not to stand so he didn't frighten her, and he could see clearly when he just lifted his head. Johanna burst through the door of the viewing room and practically pressed herself against the glass. "Leah, everything's fine," she assured, standing and walking over to the glass. "What the hell is going on?" Johanna turned behind her to look at Alpha Blaton. "They're being quarantined," Leah heard Alpha Blaton murmur quietly. "They should only need to be in there a few more hours. That drive." Wullahan appeared behind Leah and pointed towards the table. "Is magic, and we don't know how to contain it. We also don't know if it's affected any of us. Luke is working with the blacksmith as we speak so we can contain it and get them out of there. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Alpha tried to assure her. But you're all right. I'm fine. Aunt Johanna. Promise. I'm just reading with Lev over there. They brought me pillows and blankets. So I'm really comfortable and holy, that's Lev. Aunt Johanna's eyes grew wide. Are you sure we can't rust her? Drive in while Aunt stood next to drive. Walla hon and looked at Johanna with unsure eyes. Stop, Nelia shouted, glaring at him. Guys. Alpha pointed across the room. Nelia turned and gasped in surprise. The mask had somehow silently gotten off the table and was almost near Lev, who was glaring and growling at it softly, slowly growing louder. Lydia raced over to block the mask from reaching him among protests from the doctors. They were right behind her and picked up the black glob with their gloved hands. Ouch, drive. While Anne rocked the glob. They all looked at his hand to see the glove fall off, burned and torn apart. Is it mad or something? Lydia asked. What's going on? Johanna shouted. Get behind me, Lev demanded. No, Lydia. Get behind me now. It was crawling closer, and closer, and closer. Get behind me. Lydia had an idea and thought about her chances. She looked down to her feet and was grateful she'd put on an old pair of sneakers. Move, she said loudly. The doctors looked at her incredulously. What the hell are? I have an idea. Now move, she shouted. The doctors rushed out of the way when Leah charged at them. She was able to take 2 large steps before she kicked the glob as hard as she could across the room. Playing soccer as a child was coming in handy. The black glob flew across the room and smacked into a tray of tools on the opposite side of the room. Movement caught Lydia's eye and she watched the council rush into the viewing room. What's going on? Councilwoman Longworth shouted. The mask landed on the floor and flashed red for a second before moving even faster towards Lev. Oh, it's mad now. Drive in, Wylan shouted. Lev sunk his teeth into the back of Lydia's shirt and yanked her behind him as quickly and gently as possible. No, let me go. Lydia shouted in his mind. He growled louder to drown her out. It was a few feet from them now and it was livid. I've got it. Alpha Lou crushed into the room as fast as he could, lugging the box he could hardly carry. His hair flew behind him as he almost tripped trying to get into the room. He opened the door, distracting the glob, and tossed it as far as he could drive. Wallahan, who still had his gloves on, also struggled to pick up the box. The silver glinted off of the light and right into Leah's eyes. Right as she got her sight back, she heard a loud bang and opened her eyes to see the box sitting open, side down. She let out a deep breath. Problem solved. Chapter 28. Okay. Now lift it up good. Now close it, drive. While Lance snapped the lid shut and it closed with a loud, resounding bang. Is everyone all right? He asked in a tired voice. Lev dropped Leah's shirt from his mouth and rubbed her chest with his head. He tried his best not to push her over while doing so. Fine, Lydia answered in a clipped tone. She stepped away from Lev's grasp. We're just going to stay in here a little while longer to make sure it doesn't escape. Drive. Wallahan said loudly to the people viewing behind the glass. Everyone gave a sigh of relief. The doctors both collapsed onto their little stools and heaved sighs of relief. Leah plopped back down into her pile of blankets and ignored Lev to pick up the book she had been reading. The room rumbled as he laid back down and softly placed his head on her lap. I'm mad at you, Leah murmured. His ears perked and he lifted his head to look her in her eyes. What? Why was she mad at her? Why? You shouldn't have pulled me back. Lydia fought to not give in to his cute, serious stare. I will always protect you at all costs. Lev swore. I'm still learning about what mates are, but I know I will never allow anything to ever hurt you. It was after you. Lev, it wouldn't have hurt me. Lydia scoffed. Lev crawled to cuddle closer to her. It would have hurt you to move you out of the way, he explained gently. Fine, she said aloud, attracting the attention of the doctors. I didn't want you to get hurt again. Nor are you, he whispered. Lelia put down her book and wrapped her arms around his large neck to cuddle him. Let's do our tests now, so we can get you guys out of here sooner, Drive. Warren said with a small, sympathetic smile. Both Lelia and Lev had their red water taken and tested for any trace of the blob. There is an ancient test that shows traces of magic, but it hasn't been needed for centuries. Lelia, you're clean and good to go. Drive in, Wylan said. So are you. Lev, his test results came a few minutes later. You are going to have to shift to get out of here. I should have a wheelchair, yes. Right over here, Drive. Wylan moved to assist him and Lelia turned her back to give him privacy. She heard and winced at the loud breaking and snapping of bones and tried not to turn around when she heard gasps from both doctors. Can today be any stranger? Drive Warren whispered. What's going on? This is baffling. A few moments passed. Hello. Lelia begged silently for an answer. What's wrong? She projected into Lev's mind to assure he was all right. I don't know. Even Lev sounded astonished. Lelia was ready to close her eyes if he was still nude, but needed to see if he was all right. She turned to face him and gasped at the fact that he was standing. He was standing and moving his arms and legs around perfectly fine. A quick glance downward revealed he was still nude, and she quickly clenched her eyes shut and whirled back around. Can you dress him? She asked with a deep blush forming on her cheeks. Sure. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Hearts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It must be because of his lichen form. Right. Drive in, Mullen murmured. That has to be it. You're all set. Lev Drive. Warren responded. Lelia turned around and jumped onto Lev's back, squealing in happiness. He barely caught her without tumbling to the ground and both doctors' arms reached out to steady him. Easy there, Lelia. He still needs to get used to the way his body works. Drive Warren laughed. Lelia sheepishly slid off of his back and grabbed his hand. Let's go surprise Mom and Aunt Johanna, she said with a smile. Everything was falling into place. Lev walked clumsily down the hall and she was patient with him, encouraging him quietly until they reached Kate and Johanna's room. He didn't need to catch his breath, take a break, or anything. She was so impressed that his lichen form had made his human form so much stronger. She gave him an encouraging smile and rapped her knuckles on the door. Johanna, who had probably smelled Lelia's scent, rushed to open the door and gasped at the tall, large man that took up almost the entire doorway. Levis, that you? Yeah, Lelia answered for him, wrapping her arm around his waist. He smiled at the contact. Come in. Johanna ushered them through the door. How are you both out of there already? What happened? Lelia. Thank the goddess you're all right. Kate sighed in relief from her bed. She opened her arms to her daughter, who was quick to rush around the room and into her arms. Lev, Kate gasped while holding Lelia. That's Lev. His lichen form made his human form stronger, Lelia explained even though her words were muffled by her mom's shoulder. It's nice to see you up and moving, Johanna said and moved in for a hug. Lelia glanced at Les wide, unsure eyes. Hug her back, she whispered in his mind. His arms slowly came up and limply wrapped around her shoulders. Lelia couldn't hold back her giggle even though Lev glared at her. Come here, Kate demanded, pulling away from Lelia. You'd better give me a better hug than that. Lev walked over and Kate squeezed him in an extremely tight hug. He tried to do the same. Lelia didn't know why her mother was so passionate about Lev. She always grew excited when he was in the room with her, and Lelia had a feeling she'd be obsessed with Lev's second form. How are you doing? Kate asked him and pulled away from the hug. Good. He said he's feeling good. Lelia answered for him. Both Kate and Johanna turned to her in confusion. We can mind link. You haven't. Johanna trailed off in anticipation. No, we haven't done that yet. Lelia blushed again. She had never even come close to thinking about that. Usually mates were unable to mind link unless Martin mated, but she guessed her and Lev were a special case. It probably has to do with his lycanthropy. Kate murmured. Has he shifted into his original form yet? Yes, but well then let's see it. Kate clapped excitedly. He's larger than this room. Lelia calmed Kate down. Her shoulders slumped but perked back up a second later. He's that large. The lichen Isa was the size of this bed, Kate whispered. And Johanna and Lelia both smiled at Liv. That's just another reason why he's special. Chapter 29. The nurse is unable to escape from the silver box. Alpha Blattall announced in the conference room the next morning. Alpha Blattall and Alpha Luke had been truly shocked when they saw Liv's human form. He had easily grown almost a foot taller than before and had towered over both alphas. He was clearly stronger than them too. The council was in awe. Every one of them had witnessed the size of his lichen and they were more excited than anything. Both doctors were able to get some rest last night, and they'll be doing tests on at the Mars all day. When the council leaves, they'll be taking it with them. Council, do you have any new information? Alpha Luke questioned. Our investigators infiltrated the June Pack 2 days ago. Councilman Joel Old cleared his throat. We've confirmed the accusations and should be making the arrest today. Howard will be stripped of his title and put in prison with the council. Thank you. Lelia sighed in relief. Lev tight and his grip on her hand. He hadn't heard much of her situation and her old pack, but just the thought of that man trying to force his mating on Lelia made him so livid he could barely stay seated. Lev, do you think the council's army could handle going against Roman's pack? Does he have any more lichens? Councilman and Hart questioned. I was the strongest warrior by far, Lev answered through Lelia's head. She repeated his answer to the council. How big is the council's army? About 2,000 warriors, Councilwoman Longworth answered shortly. Lelia gasped loudly at the size. Alpha Howie's pack was one of the largest packs in North America, and he only had about 75 warriors. I will fight, Lev snarled in Lelia's head, causing her to flinch in her seat. I will slaughter that man if it's the last thing I do. I think that means yes, Lelia answered tentatively. Lev was vibrating with rage in his seat. We need a positive answer. Lev, we need to be sure before we go to war. How many wolves does he have? We will win if I fight. He has more warriors than the council, he murmured to Lelia. She looked at him in surprise. He said Roman has more warriors than the council. Lelia whispered. What? Impossible. One of the council men scoffed. 2380 for warriors. Lelia gasped at the words in her head. Lev tightened his grip on her hand. 2383 without me. They have almost 20 for 100 warriors, she said aloud. How do they have so many? Councilman and Hart asked in astonishment. If they've been harvesting wolves for years, it makes sense. What if Lelia swallowed a lump down her throat? What if he's been using whatever magic he used with Lev to keep them alive? To brainwash them. My God, Councilwoman Longworth whispered. This is much more serious than I thought. We don't want to massacre innocent wolves. Think on it, Alpha Blattall murmured. The stress in the room was so thick Lelia thought she would choke on it. I will keep you updated on the results of the tests. The council left first and Lelia and Lev followed far behind. I can't believe him, Lelia muttered softly as they walked back to their room. Who Roman? Who else? He's insane. She opened the door and Lev sat on the bed and took a deep breath. Stay here, Lelia suddenly remembered. I forgot to ask the Alphas a question. She rushed back to the room and blushed again when she burst through the door to see Alpha Blaton and Alpha Luke locking lips. "Sorry," she whispered. They both cleared their throat and stood tall. "Is there a place for Lev to shift? We can't go outside in case people see him." "Maybe the gym." Alpha Luke directed his question to his mate. "That sounds good. I let the pack know that the gym will be closed for about an hour a day. The council wants to inform the pack of Lev's existence. Lelia, they plan on asking you tomorrow," Alpha Blaton said. "As long as Alpha Howie is gone, I don't see a problem. I feel good about our odds against Roman," she muttered. "I want to kick his ass." "I'm sorry, Lelia." Alpha Luke apologized for laughing. "I've just never heard you speak like that. Lev has lived in pain for centuries by having to hide his lichen." "I want him down," she murmured angrily. Alpha Blaton gave her a small, confident smile. "We'll get him," Alpha Blaton said. "I can call on allies. They will all want to take him down." "Thank you," Lelia said. "I could never, ever thank you enough. Stop thanking us." Alpha Luke jokingly scolded. "I'll go join Lev. Let me know what time the gym will be closed." "No problem. Have a good night," Alpha Blaton dismissed. Lydia closed the door as they leaned in to kiss again. How could they do that in such a public place? When she got back to her room, Lev was trying to take his shirt off but got completely tangled with his arms. "Do you need help?" Lydia giggled. He groaned in response. Her fingers grasped the edge of his shirt and pulled straight up, finally untangling his arms. Lydia tried not to stare too long at his chest. She'd never seen anything like it. His chest was wide and thick and ripples moved up his body whenever he moved his arms. She gulped as she trailed down to look at the divots in his abdomen. He really was sculpted by the goddess. "Do you want pajamas now?" How was it possible that his voice had gotten deeper? Did that happen because of his lichen too? This was all too much for Leah, who hadn't received any male touch or attention all of her life. "Let me at least get you pajama pants." "What?" he asked in her mind. She had turned around to face him and he had somehow silently taken his pants off. "Put these on." She held out the pants Alpha Blaton had given her and then turned back around. "There is no reason to be embarrassed, mate," Liv murmured. He sounded genuinely confused and Lelia forgot that he didn't really know what was acceptable. In this world, mates don't see each other without clothes until they... "You know," she murmured quietly. Lelia quickly looked through the dresser drawers for her pajamas. "I don't know. What are you talking about?" Lev asked. Lelia pressed her palms to her extremely warm cheeks. "Ask Alpha Blaton or drive." "Wallahan, not me." She rushed into the connected bathroom and took her time changing. It was going to be strange sleeping with him. She didn't mind. Not at all, but she had been used to hugging a baller for every night. "Well," his chest Lelia cut off her own thoughts with a shake of her head. "Goodness goddess," she murmured, continuing to hold her palms to her cheeks. "What am I going to do?" Chapter 30. Lelia woke up in big, strong arms, and resting her head on a broad, comfortable chest Lev. When she glanced up at his face, it was still relaxed in sleep. One of her arms was trapped between their chests, but the other was wrapped around his left side. Lelia tapped her fingers lightly against Lev's ribs. She was distracted in thought. What was she supposed to say to Alpha Blaton about announcing Lev's lichen form? She knew the excitement would be palpable but was still so fearful of Roman. She had seen firsthand how powerful he was, and now that she knew he had some sort of magic on his side, she was fearful of the unknown. "Mate," Lev sighed in his sleep. He turned over and wrapped both of his arms around her and squeezed. Lelia reveled in the pressure around her. It was soothing, along with the scent coming from her mate. It didn't take long for her to fall back asleep, and she woke again to the sound of their bedroom door closing. The pressure of Lev's arms wasn't around her anymore, but his scent still filled the room. Lydia cracked her eyes open to see Lev trying to set a tray down on his nightstand as quietly as possible. A second later, his left arm, when trying to pull away from the tray, knocked the lamp to the floor. It didn't break, luckily for him, but he still turned to his mate with wide eyes. His shoulders slumped when he saw she was awake. "Damn it," he muttered in his head. She heard it and smiled widely. "I was already awake." She croaked and giggled a little. "What's that?" She smiled brightly. "Was that your idea, yes?" Lydia slightly startled at his actual voice. "Thank you," she murmured. Lev moved the tray towards her once she was leaned against the headboard and rested it against her thighs. She wolfed down the food hungrily and licked her fingers afterwards. Lev was grateful for her, and he was happy that he had been able to make her happy. The mates were able to last through lunch without any major problems. Alpha Lu called them into the conference room where the council was already waiting. Lev made sure Lydia was sitting down and comfortable before he took his seat. "Jack couldn't be here today," Alpha Luke started, "because Howard, previously of the June Pack, escaped custody last night." "What? Why weren't we informed?" Councilman Enhart snarled. Lydia reached for Lev's hand and squeezed it, trying not to let her fear consume her. "He hasn't come near the pack yet, but I'm holding this meeting to let you know that our trackers have lost him. Jack is keeping a tight eye on security and has doubled it since last night." Alpha Lu could see Lydia's fear and gave her a small, apologetic smile. "Clearly your trackers need more training. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Councilman Jar'old snarled. Howard pulled a dirty trick on them. They weren't prepared. "It doesn't matter now. Either of you," Councilwoman Longworth halted the argument. "Keep us updated. Any news on the experiments? The tests should be finished in a few hours," Alpha Luke answered stiffly. He didn't bother hiding his anger at the disrespect from the council. They grilled him some more, asking question after question, but Lev could only focus on his mate. She had to know that he would protect her. Right. That imbecile wouldn't be getting anywhere near her. Now, without Lev, he was snapped back into conversation when he heard his name. "Lydia, Jack wants to know if you both are ready to announce Lev's lichen. Our army will be here in the next few days," one councilman assured. "We'll be ready." Lydia was terrified of the unknown. Yes, they had the manpower, but she didn't know no one knew Roman's source of magic. She looked towards Lev. "Are you okay with it?" she asked Lev. The room had gone quiet waiting for her response. "I'm ready to kick his ass," Lev said. "No one else deserved to go through what I went through," Lydia said aloud. "That's all I have for you today." Alpha Luke dismissed the meeting. The council rose and left the room with quiet murmurs. Lev moved to stand until Alpha Luke sat on the other side of Lydia. "I am so sorry," Alpha Luke apologized. "On behalf of Jack and I, we are extremely sorry and will not let him enter pack borders." "Not your fault," Lydia murmured. "Jack planned the tentative ceremony in a few hours. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We'll link you with any update." "Sounds good," Lydia said. Alpha Luke patted her shoulder before exiting to find his mate and help him with security. Lev helped Lydia rise and pulled her into a tight hug. It was nice. Lydia hadn't had this kind of hug in years, and her eyes pricked with tears at the physical touch. "It will all be okay," Lev encouraged. He didn't want her to be scared or nervous. They had a lot of people on their side. Roman just had. "Roman, I know. she said in response. They stayed like that, just for a moment, until a mind link burst through her head. This time, it wasn't from Lev. Southeastern border breached. The alert went to the entire pack. It hadn't joined yet. Gripped Leah tighter when she winced and grabbed at her head. Goddess, it hadn't even been an hour since the meeting finished. What's wrong? Lev's worried, calm voice was a nice change, compared to the shout. His hands pulled her away from her head. The border was breached. It can't be Alpha Howie, could it? Hoping he would say yes. If he was going to show up, it would be in a few days. He wouldn't be able to run that fast, he murmured. Lev wrapped her back up in a hug and a hug and a hug and to take her back up to their room for a nap. That would relax her. Inside border breach, prepare for lockdown. Lydia winced in the hallway and Lev was quick to hold her. Another message. Whoever it is, they breached the inside border. Lydia trailed off. Let's go lie down. Lev brushed her hair away from her face and continued to lead her to their room. She had just sat down on the bed when another announcement rolled out. Any warriors available at the moment, please assist near the river. Bend. Alpha Blaton was calmer than the other wolf sending them updates. Lydia. The Alpha sent directly to her. We're going to have to reveal Lev sooner than planned. He needs to be out here now, it's Howard and he's gone completely rabid. I don't know how he's taking down warriors. Lydia's breath caught in her throat when the link was cut off. They need your help, she whispered. What? You need to go now. It's Alpha Howie. They need your help, she shouted. But Lycan. Lev, you have to go now. I'm not sure if Alpha Blaton is all right, she whispered. His forehead tightened. Fine. He pulled her into a hug tightly. Get some rest. I'll be back soon. Okay, was all Leah could choke out. It was like her throat, her only airway, was blocked and she couldn't break through it without bursting into tears. Lydia avoided looking out the window. She had never been to the riverbend and didn't know how close it was to the pack house. Come back home, she whispered. Please. Chapter 31. Lev almost shattered the front door when he ran through it. He was grateful he didn't. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Because he had no way to pay the pack back. The door was left wide open behind him. Everyone in the house was in their rooms or in hiding because of the breach. The breach. This bastard Alpha wouldn't leave his mate alone. And for what? A forced mating. A furious snarl ripped through his throat. How dare he think he has the right? To Lev's surprise, he was actually nervous about shifting. He hadn't fought in his new form, and he also didn't know how his own pack would react. It was strange to have a pack that supported you rather than fighting for your position. Dark brown fur sprouted from his body as he shifted and grew into the air. The ground rumbled underneath him as he ran, quicker than any other wolf including Roman's pack to the battlefield. He smelt them as soon as he left the house. When he got there, his stomach curled at the sight of the fight. It was a red water bath. How was that weak Alpha able to get through so many warriors? For once, Lev felt the pain of the families when they would learn their loved ones were dead. In Roman's pack, he had no connections. But these people, they were family. A break occurred in the fight. Lev caught a glance of the asshole's face and tripped over his own feet, causing him to skid straight into the middle of the battle. Magic. That had to be the only explanation behind this. Howard's eyes glowed a bright, blinding purple as slobber practically poured from his mouth. As all of the wolves paused near the riverbend, a slightly larger wolf jogged over to stand near Lev. By the smell of it, Alpha Blaton was standing next to him and giving him a small, thankful nod. It seemed like Lev would be the only one able to defeat this magical beast Alpha Howard had become. Wolves in the pack began to back away in awe and fear as Lev charged towards the murderer. "I will avenge you." He swore to do his absolute best. Howard saw the lichen coming towards him and dropped the paw that he had ripped off of a warrior. Seeing that only fueled Lev's rage. The beast charged towards the other beast, and at once they collided in a mess of growls, snarls, and fury. Lev had the upper hand first. Other warriors were smart to not get involved and left Lev to fight on his own. He was not offended in the slightest. He put his anger at the fallen warriors, anger at the stress and fear Howard was putting Lydia through, into the fight. To my agent extraordinaire, Myelin Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing Kishut's enthusiasm. Howard may have been magic, but he was no match for Lev's fury. His mate was involved. That was all it took. A few minutes into the snarling mess of slobber they were creating, and the warriors around him began to yip and bark in celebration when they saw what Lev was holding. He would put Howard's face on a spike and parade it around to get the humiliation he deserved. After he had beheaded the imbecile, it took a long time for him to calm down. Alpha Blaton had shifted back and urged him to calm down, but it was no use. The only thing that eventually worked was Lydia. "It's all right," she encouraged. "You won. You made your pack proud." Lev's growling ceased and a rumble of pride flowed through him. "Follow us back to the pack house, Lev," Alpha Blaton muttered, clearly exhausted if his posture was any indication. His back was practically slumped forward. This was the part he was dreading being introduced to the pack. He was already nervous about being revealed, but it had obviously not gone according to plan. What if they feared him now? Lydia was waiting for him on the steps to the porch of the pack house as well as Alpha Luke. Lydia couldn't help her bright smile as she sprinted towards him and collided with one of his legs. She ignored the whispers of her pack mates and cuddled into his leg, glad he wasn't severely injured. There had been a few scratches, but his lichen healed them rapidly. "Gather the entire pack," Alpha Blaton bellowed loudly. Alpha Luke was tucked into his side. "We have some explaining to do." Wolves came out of hiding to gather in the lodge, there in backyard. "I apologize for not being able to explain sooner, but research needed to be done. As you all know, Lev and Lydia here found refuge with us after being held in a hostage situation." Alpha Blaton wiped his sweaty hair away from his forehead. "We have discovered that Lev is one of the original North American lichens," Alpha Blaton said loudly. The crowd murmured loudly and Lydia was refusing to take her face out of Lev's furry leg. She didn't want to see if the crowd was angry. "That's impossible," a male pack member shouted. "It has been verified by the council, who have been staying here for almost a week. We didn't inform you because both of their lives are in danger, so we ask that you keep this a secret." "It's very important," Alpha Luke explained. "To my agent extraordinaire, Myelin Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing Kishut's enthusiasm." The crowd seemed to dissipate. A few stayed back to look at Lev in awe, but he was surprised no one had a problem with him being in the pack. But he was grateful for. He looked at Elia and released a loud breath of relief. She smiled proudly at him and scratched the side of him. "Kakon," Lev tried to flatten himself to the ground as much as possible. "Are you serious?" Alpha Blaton turned to see if they were talking to him. "Why would I be joking?" Elia blushed and glanced around, meeting eyes with a smirking Alpha Blaton. She gripped Lev's foot tight and prayed she wasn't hurting him when she pulled on it. It took her a minute, but after a while she was able to swing her left leg over and rest on top of him. She wiggled uncomfortably. It wasn't too comfortable for her legs, but she nuzzled into his fur and forgot about the soreness. The council was waiting for them inside the front doors after Lev had shifted into his human form and pulled on the clothes he had been wearing before the fight. Is everything taken care of? Councilwoman Frida L. asked quietly. Yes, Alpha Luke walked in behind them with Alpha Luke pulled into his side. How did an exiled Alpha manage to get through your ranks? Councilman Jarl asked incredulously. Liv growled at the attitude towards his Alpha. He was really starting to think of this back, and he would do anything to protect it even if it meant going against the Council. He just had to keep reminding himself that they needed the Council and their army to defeat Roman. And defeat they would, hopefully. Chapter 32. I think we will take our leave now. Councilwoman Jarl muttered the next morning in the conference room. Are you not staying to help fight? We said we were bringing our army. Is that not enough for you? Alpha Blatthorn. Councilman Jarl with a sneer. Goddess, what Lev would do to be able to smack some sense into that man. He was abandoning them, and he had the audacity to sneer at them. Lev has already said they outnumber us. Alpha Blatthorn murmured. We could use all the help we can get. You've received all of the help you can get, Councilwoman Longworth. And that includes us, Councilman Jarl. I don't know where you think you are going. We've given them our entire army. I think it's okay for us to sit this one out. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. Suddenly losing the confidence he had before. That's all the more reason we should stay. If you insist on your selfish needs, you are more than welcome to go back. Our army will not be there to protect you, Councilwoman Frida L. countered. Jarl's face flushed red in embarrassment and anger. Lilia wrapped herself around one of Lev's arms and laid her head on his shoulder, just watching the bickering going on. This was the council, the ones that ruled above the werewolf world. She scoffed inside. I'm starving, Lev muttered in her head. He had obviously stopped paying attention to the meeting too. We just ate. She giggled. Leia felt him grin before she saw it. Your mate is hungry. You should feed him. My mate also has legs that work perfectly. She teased right back. He leaned her head against hers. She felt more mature than any adult in this room, but her naivety led her the other direction. Lydia shook her head. It wasn't the time to think about this. I can bring our food back to our room, Nev asked eagerly. They finally had a bit of time to themselves last night, and Lev had discovered the TV. Lydia was surprised it had taken him this long. There was a TV in their room, and it had been there since they had been originally placed in the room. Liv finally asked about it and couldn't take his eyes off the screen. Lydia didn't get to much TV in her old pack because Howard always said resources were low. Now that she knew it wasn't true, she was educating both of them. He didn't believe her when she told him people don't watch TV by standing right in front of the screen. She smiled at the memory. What's so funny? Nev accused. But he was smiling too. Your obsession with the TV, she laughed in his head. Don't laugh at me, he grumbled. The arguing in the room stopped. I will stay. Blatthorn. It is up to the rest of them. Councilwoman Longworth motioned to the other council members. They all announced that they would stay. I'll stay, Councilman Jarl mumbled with a glare at the councilwoman. She ignored him and just smiled at the Alphas. Have a great day, Alpha Luke said. Nev jumped from his seat, picked Lydia up in a rush, and jumped up the stairs towards two at a time. Lydia squealed and covered her face in embarrassment because of the chuckles that came from the council and the Alphas. Stop rushing, she squealed, just before he tossed her gently onto the bed. She landed with a grunt. I'll be back. Do you want anything? Bouncing on the balls of his feet, Lydia shook her head in mock disappointment. No. She didn't even get it all the way out to Four Levers jogging down the hall. She turned the TV on and looked for one of her favorite shows that happened to be the only ones her old pack hadn't got up to use the attached bedroom. She was done a minute later. and jumped when she opened the door and sort of munching on a steak in his hand. "You have to use silverware, La," she murmured. He gave her a grumpy look and a low whine. "But no one else is here." He winked in her head. "Fine." She sighed and sat against the headboard next to him. He looked at her for a few seconds and grumpy Ly picked up his fork. Without even looking at him, Leah took the fork and used it to cut a piece from the steak and shove it in her mouth. Lev stared at the steak in awe, then turned to Leah with a pout. "That was mine." Leah gaped at Lev's face. This lichen was pouting. "What the hell? You said you didn't want any food." He winked again. "Lev, we can get more food," she explained to him. He stared back at the TV and moved his plate away from Leah and her fork. "Then go get your own food," he grumbled. Her eyes widened. Maybe TV was bad for him. Like a child, Leah had to practically pull Lev away from the TV a few hours later. Alpha Blaton wanted Lev in on the training so that we would know Roman's tactics, but this baby lichen didn't like to stop watching TV. "Lev, we really have to go. It's not going to look good if we're late." She yanked on his arm, but he wasn't budging. "The TV will be here when we get back." "Fine," he growled in her head. Lev allowed her to pull him up and grumbled all the way to the field the pack used for training. He straightened up when he saw the amount of wolves there. About 40 wolves, both men and women, were sparring. It seems Alpha Blaton didn't want to wait for his arrival. "Lev, thank you for joining us," Alpha Blaton greeted when he noticed Lev and Leah standing and watching the sparring. "Listen up. This is weird," Leah murmured to Lev. Just a few days ago, they were doing everything they could to hide his lichen, but now all attention was on them. "I will lead training today. Lev and Leah will be walking around and giving advice on how to defeat the rogue pack," Alpha Blaton announced. "Back to your sparring." Everyone continued their sparring with a quick glance at the lichen. Alpha Blaton stepped up to face them. "Lev, just go around and tell the warriors what they should and shouldn't be doing in a fight with Roman." "I'll be his translator," Leah smiled. Not everyone approved of a booming voice in their head and they didn't want the warriors to be frightened of Lev. "Thanks. You guys, I'll be over here if you need me." Leah and Lev left the Alpha on his own to start walking leisurely around the warriors. They stopped near a young boy and a young woman sparring. He needs to correct his footing and work on his reflexes. "Roman's warriors will kick his ass like that," Lev muttered and moved on to the next few warriors. "Work on your footing and your reflexes, and you should be fine." Leah smiled at the couple. They nodded back and continued sparring. She left out the part about getting his ass kicked. For the next few hours, Leah followed Lev well. More like scurried behind him because once he started moving, his long legs were too fast for Leah to catch up. Alpha Blaton announced that training was over about 2 hours after it began. "Holy crap!" Leah wheezed behind him. Lev's head snapped to hers. "You walk fast. Are you okay?" he asked worriedly. He was worried this might make her sick, and seeing her sick once was more than enough for him. "Yeah, I'm fine." Leah tried to take a deep breath between words, but felt like her lungs were unopening all the way. "Blaton can help me next time. Let's go inside." No. Leah breathed when Lev reached underneath her to pick her up. "I want to walk." "Now is not the time to be stubborn," Lev demanded in her head. "We'll take our time," she muttered. "I don't want you to get sick again." He said this like a wounded puppy, or a sad child. Leah simply linked her right arm with his left and let him slowly lead her back to the pack house. Kate was sipping tea on the front porch with Johanna and a woman Leah didn't know. "I'm Leah," she introduced, still slightly breathy from their walk. "My name is Leah. Nice to meet you. Kate has talked a lot about you." The woman, Leah, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. This is Lev, my mate, she introduced. Oh, the lichen. It's nice to meet you. The woman bowed her head slightly. No need for formalities, Lev said inside Leah's mind. She gasped and turned to Kate. So it is true. You didn't believe it? Kate asked with a chuckle. Leela looked so surprised. I trust my alpha, but none of us had seen him shift. Leela answered. Oh, Johanna chuckled. Some pack members have seen him shift. We are grateful for your presence, Leela said to Lev. What does that mean? Lev asked his mate. She's thankful you're here to protect the pack, Leela explained. He just nodded at the woman and looped his arm around Lelia's shoulder. Lev wants to head inside, Lelia told the group. Use protection, chapter 33. I can't believe she said that. Lelia covered her red cheeks to try and hide her embarrassment. What does it mean? Lev asked her innocently. Lelia choked on her saliva in the hallway a few feet away from their room. Damn it. I knew you'd get sick, Lev muttered to her. I'm not sick, Lelia whispered. She caught her breath and trailing shortly behind. Then what's wrong? He asked gently. Sex education is not something I want to teach my mate. Lelia blushed. Maybe drive. Wallahan would be willing to teach you. Lev paled. He moved to sit down on the bed and looked at Lelia with an expression she had never seen from him before. You know about it. Goddess, she couldn't believe she was having this conversation with her soulmate. Roman mentioned it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, and threatened us with it. Any of our desires were forced to be pushed to the back of our minds. That's what this is about. He seemed genuinely confused. How much had Roman taught him? What had Roman taught him? Let's watch TV or something. Leah tried to change the subject. What's protection? Asked Drive. Wallahan. Lelia felt as if the heat of her cheeks could light a match. She covered them with her hands and crawled into bed. Do you want to watch a movie? She looked up to see if Lev was going to answer her, but he had somehow silently escaped from the room. Where'd you go? She projected into his mind. You said to ask Drive. Wallahan, he said innocently. Leah almost smacked her hand to her forehead. I didn't mean right now, she mumbled aloud. Lelia crawled out of bed and knocked on her mother's door. Come in. You shouldn't just say come in, Mom. You won't know who it is, Lelia said as she opened the door. Johanna was helping Kate do some leg and arm exercises on her bed. My senses have been growing stronger, Kate said with a smile. Johanna released her sister's arms and stood to give Lelia a hug. That's good, Lelia murmured. She hugged Johanna and sat next to her mother, clearly distracted if the dazed look in her eyes was any indication. Everything okay? Kate asked gently. Lev is talking to Drive. Wallahan about protection right now, Lelia said quietly. Johanna sent his smirk her way. You know what? We haven't had the sex talk yet. Have we? Kate asked. Leah turned to her, horrified. No, we've had it. We've had it. You don't remember? It must be a symptom of the medication. Lelia breathed, clearly rushed. She turned to Johanna for help. Yeah, Johanna said hesitantly. That was a stressful week. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You might not remember. Huh, Kate murmured. She gave her sister a doubtful look, but dropped the subject. We aren't like normal mates. Normal mates mate within the first week, but it's been so strangely it was cut off. First of all, there is no definition of normal. Second of all, you and Lev are on your own path. Whenever you both are comfortable, it will happen. Kate rubbed Lydia's hand. Lydia nodded her head and sat with her thoughts for a moment. She looked up just in time to see Johanna give her mother a suspicious glance. What? Were they hiding something from her? Johanna gave Kate another look. Tell her, Johanna said, and motioned with her hand. Lydia's gaze snapped to her mother. I got out. Kate stuttered. She sat there blushing as if she had been asked out for the first time. What? Lydia shrieked. Kate flinched and Johanna smiled at her reaction. Your father. Kate swallowed the lump in her throat. He was a great man. I'm ready to move on. A pack warrior asked me out yesterday. That's great. Mom, really. I'm so happy for you. Lydia pulled her mother into a tight hug. Her eyes began to water at the remembrance of the loss of her father. Hopefully this man would be good for her mother. She won't let me meet him. Johanna scowled. Lydia laughed when she pulled away from her mother. I wouldn't either. Hey, Johanna wind. Lydia and Kate giggled loudly. A knock on the door sounded, and the room fell silent while Lydia opened the door. She smiled and blushed again at Lev, who looked a little dazed. Who is it? Johanna asked, even though she snickered because she knew exactly who it was. I'll see you guys later, Lydia called and closed the door. She wrapped her hand around Lev's and pulled him into their room. Is everything all right? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sex isn't what I thought it was. He told me mates typically do that when they first meet. I'm still so confused. Lydia's heart clenched. It seemed like his brain was going a millisecond. You don't have to worry about that now. We'll worry about it when the time comes. She pulled him into a hug and rubbed his back gently. Her body warmed when his arms wrapped around her and squeezed her tight. I am sorry you didn't get the normal mate experience, he mumbled in her head. Lydia pulled back and grabbed his face. Her hands, slightly cold, resting on his cheeks, and she smiled as she pushed them together to squish his face. Don't ever apologize. None of it was your fault, she promised. Lev pushed his face forward abruptly and all Lydia could do was close her eyes. What was he going to do? He might hit her face accidentally. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, he kissed her. Lev was kissing her. Rough, chapped lips pressed against hers gently for a few moments, before he pulled away. I saw that on TV, Lev whispered in her head. I really wanted to try it. Lydia didn't know how to respond other than pulling him back into the kiss. Goddess, this was something she would surely become addicted to. How did mates ever stop doing this? Lydia pulled back and stared at her mate for a few silent moments. She was trying to process what had just happened and she could just feel even more blush rising to her cheeks. Lydia flopped back onto the bed with a small smile. Was that okay? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She projected to him, too afraid her voice would crack if she spoke aloud. It was fun, he cheered innocently. Lydia rolled over so her face was deep into her pillow and fought the urge to scream excitedly. Sometimes, Lev's knowledge or lack of came in handy sometimes. She smiled and rolled over so she could breathe. Her hair tangled around her face and she silently watched Lev scoot over so he was sitting next to her again. Can we do it again? Once again. Red water rushed to her cheeks. Was it possible for her skin to actually catch on fire? You don't have to ask, she murmured. Lydia enjoyed it so much and she would push him away when she had enough. Lev leaned in and kissed her, and goddess it would never grow old. Chapter 30 for Lydia 11. We need to meet in 10 minutes in the conference room. Lydia rushed to pull back from the kiss her, and Lev had been locked in for almost half an hour. Lev removed his hands from her tangled hair and glanced at the door. "We have to go," Lydia whispered. Her lips, soft, swollen, and dark pink, were an addiction to Lev. His newfound addiction being interrupted made him want to bar their door for the rest of their lives. "I'm going to go clean up," she coughed. Lydia rushed into the adjoining bathroom and Lev allowed himself to flop onto his back on the bed. He reached up and touched his own lips to find them swollen as well. Lev grinned a smug grin. Lydia exited the bathroom moments later. Her lips a spiral. Lev wanted to fall down. He cleared his throat and shook his head to try and clear the image to no avail. She walked up to the bed and held out her hand for Lev to take. He soon intertwined his fingers with hers and walked next to her until they got to the conference room. They were the last ones to arrive. The council sat in their regular seats, as well as both doctors, while the Alphas stood at the front of the room. Alpha Blaton gave Lev a knowing smirk while they sat down. "Did we interrupt something?" he asked in Lev's head. The Lycan only glared at him. "We called you here today because we fear Roman will attack soon. Rumors have begun to come up from southern pacts that a large group of wolves has been seen moving through our territory," Alpha Luke announced. Blaton turned his attention to his mate. "They could be moving to a stopping point then attacking. Councilman, your old guest." Everyone looked around the room at each other. "We need to make sure our stations, patrol, and guard are ready. Lev, we will be having extra training this week. I would like you to be there," Alpha Blaton murmured. "You will," Lydia promised. She tried not to think about her tingling lips and focused on what the Alphas were saying. "Sure," Lev spoke loudly. Lydia flinched next to him. He spoke so often through their minds that she had forgotten he could talk. He shot her glance to make sure she was all right. Lydia gave him a small smile and tried to wipe the shock off of her face. "We will begin to participate in training." Councilwoman Longworth pointed her gaze at Councilman Gerald. "Anyone who fights needs to fight together. We need to learn together. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm." "Thank you for your time." Alpha Luke smiled softly at the group. Murmurs filled the room as the council slowly exited. Lydia stood, trying not to be obvious about her thoughts though. Alpha Blaton trailed off with a smile. "What did we interrupt?" "You didn't interrupt at all." Lydia coughed. Lev just smirked at the two Alphas proudly. "It's perfectly fine. Lydia. We were new mates once too." Alpha Luke cracked his mate in a side hug. It was strange to picture the two cuddly, strong Alphas acting like Lydia and Lev. "Have fun, you two," Alpha Luke teased. Lev couldn't wipe the smirk off his face as they exited and rushed back to their room. When they went to bed that night, Lydia cuddled Lev close and pulled him into another kiss. Her hand rested on his warm, tight abdomen that tensed and moved as they made out even more. She had to pull away with a smile, slightly breathy and extremely tired. "We should sleep," she whispered with a smile. Liv pulled her in tight and wrapped both arms around her. Lydia tucked her neck into his shoulder. She breathed in his peaceful, calming scent and closed her eyes. Lev listened to her breathing even out before he let his get droopy. They relaxed, basked in each other's warmth, and fell asleep holding each other. When she woke up, Lydia wanted to do something special for Lev like he had done for her. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm." He was a light sleeper, so it would be hard to get out of bed without waking him up. She slowly slid her body down his until she had escaped and tiptoed out of the room. She met her mother and Johanna in the kitchen, telling them of her plan and smiling thankfully when they offered her help. "You know, we helped Lev too," Johanna said smugly. Lydia figured he had helped because he had never been in the kitchen before. They made a quick and quiet breakfast: eggs, bacon, some potatoes, and sausage, too. She smiled at the plate before thanking her family and quietly walking up the stairs again. Lydia was surprised to see that he was still asleep. She placed the plate of food onto his nightstand and climbed back into bed to cuddle with him. He instinctively pulled her closer and leaned his head against hers. She pulled back a little. "Lev, wake up," she whispered. Lydia pressed a kiss to his nose to see if it would wake him up. It didn't. She kissed him again, and again, and again, until his whole face was smothered in kisses. He crinkled his nose and pulled her in tightly so she couldn't kiss his face anymore. "Seriously, get up," she said a little bit louder than before. He tilted her head up so she could meet his sleepy, half-closed eyes and kissed her lightly on the lips. A short moment later, Lydia watched him sniff his way over to glance at his nightstand. His face lit up like Christmas morning, which she was sure he had never experienced, and he let go of her to reach for the plate. Lydia scooted back and watched him eat quickly and excitedly. She could really get used to this. Chapter 35. The next few days were full of training, eating and sleeping, then starting all over again the next day. They hadn't heard any more rumors of Roman's wolves moving closer, so it assumed they were getting ready for battle. Alpha Blatt on at patrol even more. Lydia and Lev didn't have too much alone time anymore. Only when they would wake up in the morning together and go to bed together in the evening. It was safe to say they missed each other, but both of them knew the importance of what they had to do. Since Lydia's wolf would probably never be in enough shape to fight because of her illness, Johanna stepped in. "I have no problem fighting." Johanna shrugged. She had been training with the warriors and was a strong fighter. Lydia fought it at first, but in the end, it was Johanna's decision. As nervous as it made Lydia and Kate, they accepted it. Lev woke up early and went to bed late, but made sure to kiss his mate as much as he could. Their intimacy hadn't gone past that, and Lydia was okay with it. It was comforting. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "I have to go," Lev whispered through their link. He tried not to fully wake her up as he moved some of her hair out of her face and kissed her lips softly. "Goodbye," she muttered sleepily. He waited until her breathing evened back out to exit the room. Leaving her alone for so long during the day and having to leave her alone during the imminent fight against Roman was constantly putting him on edge. Lev always made sure his link with her was completely open at all times while he was away. A few hours of training later, and Lev looked to the sky to tell the time. 10 o'clock in the morning. Lydia would be up soon. And taking down a wolf with the same crazy eyes as that bastard on the southern border. A warrior on patrol broadcast through the link. Lev Tencent searched through the crowd for either of the alphas. Damn it. They'd skipped training today. They announced it last night. Was it attacking? Are they more? Alpha Blatt On's voice rumbled through our heads. "I have arrived as backup. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." The problem has been taken care of. It was just. Walking across the border, another warrior answered. "We don't see any more wolves," the first warrior said. "Wait, there's another." Lev's heart clenched when the words were cut off. "Chuck, Bart, someone check on patrol now." Alpha Blatt ordered. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "I think it's more of Roman's wolves. I'll head to the border just in case," Lev told Blatt Horn. Already shifted, Lev was quick to make his way to the southern border. He could smell them before he saw them. Rows upon rows of wolves infected with magic just like Alpha Howard were marching onto the June Pack territory. "Thank you, Lev?" Lev interrupted. "There's hundreds of them. They're attacking now." Sending backup. Stand by. Keep us updated. Lev, stay alive. Alpha Blaton. Yes, sir, Lev said, then launched himself into the sea of wolves. Lev to the head off of one and reached for one that had already attached itself to his flank. His size and strength gave me a large advantage even when these wolves had magic in their system. Backup arrived shortly, but Lev still took on the brunt of the wolves because he knew he could handle it. He didn't want the wolves he had become to know to lose their lives. Though Lev's heart clenched at the sight of some wolves he could have called his friends, he knew they weren't fighting of their free will. You will meet your maker, and you will finally be happy, Lev promised as he beheaded another magic wolf. Less than half left, but pack warriors are dropping like flies. Call them off. Lev demanded to Alpha Blaton. You need all the help you can get, Alpha Blaton argued. It was clear he didn't like taking orders. Call them off or the rest will die before the rogues are dead, Lev snarled to him. This wasn't a matter of pride, it was a matter of life and death. All warriors except Lev retreat immediately, Alpha Blaton sighed in all of their heads. The rest of the warriors, whining confused, backed away from the fight. Lev ripped off yet another head. The exhaustion was catching up to him. Lelia woke up to banging on her door. What? She groaned aloud, her face stuck in her pillow. Johanna burst through the door and pulled Lelia out of bed. We're being attacked, Johanna said hurriedly. That snapped Lelia out of her half, a sleep state extremely quickly, Lev. She read out while she was getting dressed. Busy, he grunted. Are you okay? I'm fine, Lev. Answer the question, she demanded. Lelia yanked on her shirt and froze when there was no response. He's not answering, she whispered to Johanna. Her face had gone stark white. She ran downstairs and rushed towards the sound of shouting. Let me go, Alpha Blaton shouted. She turned a corner to see him being held back by the council. What's going on? Where's Lev? She came to a stop. He's out there, alone. The council refuses to let me assist. We can't risk the death of an alpha over this. Let on, Councilwoman Friedel said. We can't lose a Lycan over this. Where are your priorities? I am sure he can handle himself, Alpha Blaton, Councilwoman tried to assure. Alpha Luke tried to break through the council to his mate and growled frustrated lie where he couldn't. He's out there alone, Lelia shouted. She tried to go outside but was blocked by Johanna Lev. She called out but received no answer. Please. Outside, Lelia heard the faint whisper in her head. She broke out of Johanna's arms and burst through the front door. Lev, she shouted. At the sound of her voice, his large Lycan form collapsed onto the grass, causing the ground to vibrate a little. She ignored the shakiness in her legs and raced to her mate's side. He was panting loudly, like an injured animal, and Lelia screamed at someone to get the doctor. Her heart was pounding as she collapsed next to his head. She could hear footsteps rushing after her, and Lev used all the breath he had to growl at the intruders and stop them in their tracks. Calm him down, Lelia, Alpha Blaton commanded. Drive Werewolf on his way. Lev, she whispered. He let out a low, painful whine, and Lelia tried not to glance at the injuries on his body. Everyone tentatively took steps forward until they surrounded Lev. Lev, are the rogues gone? Yes, Lev's voice was faint. Alpha Blaton visibly deflated with relief. Lelia glanced up when she caught movement and saw that every warrior from before was surrounding them, waiting to see what happened. Lev let out another whine. It's all right. I'll fix you right up, Lelia promised. Alpha Blaton knelt next to her and drive. Werewolf finally rushed up to them. Keep him calm. Drive. Werewolf ordered Lelia. Lev, tell me what happened. Hundreds of magic wolves. I was doing fine until Until what? Lev drive. Wallahan pressed a stethoscope all over Lev's body. His face paled. Doctor, Alpha Glaton warned as he stepped closer. Lydia looked down to see Ev unconscious and her grip on his foot tightened. I can't hear a heartbeat, Dr. Wallahan whispered. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.